then Denny told me he was doing Dune, and I thought, oh my God. And he said the fans are going to bring their baseball bats. So the early discussions weren't very explicit, except, abandon fear, all you enter here.
So for me, when I read the script and I saw that Ken had captured the people of Northern Ireland and say my family, Ken is Protestant working class background and we would have a Catholic working class background, but the language and the community is the same. And my dad always spoke about the great friendships with their Protestant neighbours, something that the media through the Troubles had sort of overlooked. All the focus had been on the division and not actually on basically the civil rights injustices that sparked the whole Troubles and the fact that there were friendships between the communities. So that was something really close to my heart as well, which I felt like this was a great celebration of not only Ken's beautiful family and his community, but for the people of Belfast. And the fact that the film is still called Belfast, I think is a sort of a triumph on a personal level that we've reclaimed that name from the sort of fingers of war and actually given it back the celebration of humanity.
And, Denny's films give me an opportunity to really tap in, not just in a verbal way, but in often a very cinematic way, the kind of inner life of the characters, by being able to see what's in their minds and also, very expressive images that sort of just touch you on some level that is kind of unsettling maybe or familiar. So Dune was, it was going to be, I knew right from the outset, talking about the genesis of a project, when we first talked about it, we were working on Blade Runner, and in cinema history terms, we were kind of trying not to trample the carpets of a much loved sci-fi film. And then Denny told me he was doing Dune, and I thought, oh my God. And he said the fans are going to bring their baseball bats. So the early discussions weren't very explicit, except, abandon fear, all you enter here. And it's all to do with how do you set up so many complex factions in this world. You have the Atreides at the heart of the story. You have the Bene Gesserit, you have the Mentats, you have the Harkonnens, you have the Fremen, you have 3 planets. It's the Emperor. I mean, there's a lot. And it was just always trying to kind of find a visual way and a smooth way that meant that you gave enough time to kind of care for people and find their stories compelling before you then tested them with increasingly dynamic risk. So, big battle piece sequences and fight sequences and an accelerative feeling. We always wanted to get to the end and feel like you wanted more. So that was the challenge in terms of pacing and selection, is how do you start the film actually? And how do you create threads in the edit that are going to see you all the way through to the bitter end?
Music, it was obviously a huge element, and both for the nostalgia aspect, because this movie is just so much about nostalgia, but just also just for the energy and like the youthfulness of the movie. That was something that we talked about at the beginning, was just always like keeping the momentum going throughout, kind of from scene to scene to scene, and to make it very youthful.
I think we all felt a responsibility to Daniel because he's just been, to us, such a phenomenal James Bond and a phenomenal actor in the part. It was very much about giving him a send-off that was worthy of his tenure. At the same time, having all the fun of a Bond film. Every set piece was certainly about the character. It all came from him or his collaborators. But I mean, he's lost in the forest, or if he's in that car and the twirls at the beginning, and it's about him and his relationships with others, and his solitude's about him, and so that grounds the action, and I hope in a very special way that does him justice. And yes, that was a balancing act the whole time that Carrie was interested in, brought up, and was discussed every day. The performance, the drama, and the adventure of the film.
Initially, obviously, Questlove is a very, he's a musicologist. He's got this encyclopedic Byzantine knowledge of music. he originally kind of wanted it to be a little bit more about music, because he can't help himself when he's watching the footage. And he was obsessed with the footage. He'd been watching the entire concert on a loop. It's about 40 hours of footage. And he would always be pointing to the band members, like, oh, that guy played with that guy. And later on, he was in so-and-so's band. So there was the potential originally to have it be much more of a music discussion. But, you know, we always did want to inject the political and social context into it, partially because the concert itself was not very overtly political. Unlike Woodstock, you know, you don't get a sense that there aren't people with signs saying stop the war there. You know, it's very apolitical in the moment, except of course for Jesse Jackson. But you know, so we wanted to inject that stuff kind of tucked in around the edges of the songs. And then of course we went into lockdown, and I was working at home alone and putting cuts up on Zoom, and then all the George Floyd civil rights stuff happened. And then we really felt more passionate about injecting this, you know, what was going on in 1969, because it seemed like it was all happening again, and, you know, history repeats itself. 1969 was a dark time, particularly for Black people in America. And, but we all knew that, and Questlove and, you know, other Black people on our production team, you know, there was very much a message from them saying, like, you know what, we've seen all the burning buildings and people getting beaten up by the cops, and, you know, can we please not have any shots of German shepherds attacking Black people in this film? And you know, so I was like, absolutely. I mean, of course there's still a little bit of burning buildings here and there, but not quite as much as ordinarily there might be. So, and, you know, Questlove, absolutely, it was all about showing the joy of people at this concert, and, you know, this joy and resilience, because you do see, you know, he very explicitly has said in interviews and publicly, you know, we've seen enough Black suffering, you know, let's see some Black joy for a change, essentially. And, you know, I was very happy to facilitate that.
Well, the interesting thing is this was actually the very first scene that we shot in the entire movie. Like, this was day one. Because of the way that Bradley Cooper's schedule was. So it actually, I think, worked perfectly for the scene, because obviously Cooper, you know, he's like a first-time actor, and his first scene was with Bradley Cooper basically, like, you know, intimidating him. So it actually worked so well, because I think Cooper was so nervous. And also, there's not many like improv scenes in the movie, but the stuff with Bradley Cooper, there was a lot of improv, including that whole Barbra Streisand thing that I think it was maybe mentioned in the script, but that whole thing where he couldn't say the name right, that was just improv. And so we just loved that piece, especially when he looks over at the assistant, like shrugging his shoulders. So it's like, you know, it's just finding these really good gems in the footage, and then like kind of building like a sequence around it. But I mean, you know, like with a movie like this, you kind of have to balance out. If there was movement throughout, just like constantly things moving, I mean, it would be a different kind of movie, but it would, you know, you want like the highs and lows. You want all the movement loses its impact if you just are continuing to do it. So it's like you need to have these kind of moments of kind of staticness.
The thing with Denny is he has a plan. He always has a very strong plan. He storyboards sequences very carefully. He and the production designer think through the concepts and the whole flow of a scene. But as an editor, you know, your dignity comes from, you know, doing that plan, rendering it as well as you can, but also saying, yeah, but have you thought of? And in this case, he'd shot some B-roll. It was a little uncertain exactly where it would go. It was kind of just stuff while he was in the location, and I found a sound of the sort of tinkly bells, and it just really helped me say that there's something weird about to happen. The important thing in the scene was to set up in as non-verbal a way these people, and making the kind of strange familiar, if you like.